when a stranger with midnight eyes leans in and whispers, "You're in danger. Pretend I'm your dad." The shy waitress thinks it's some creepy joke, until the lights flicker and the air turns icy. In one terrifying moment, he reveals himself as an ancient vampire king claiming her as family to shield her from the hunters closing in. But the act that's supposed to save her life might also bind her to his dark, forbidden world forever. People think danger announces itself with sirens and screaming, but mine began with a whisper. "You're in danger. Pretend I'm your dad." I thought it was just a weird sentence from a stranger in a dark booth, but that one small lie became the door to a story about courage, kindness, and a king who turned out to be less of a monster than the fears I'd carried my whole life. Rain hammered the Highway Moon Diner like it was trying to scrub the whole night away. Inside, everything felt yellow and tired. The buzzing neon sign, the grease-slick counter, the jukebox playing the same old love song no one was really listening to. My sneakers squeaked on the floor as I carried a tray of refills from table to table, pretending my feet didn't ache, pretending I didn't have rent due in 4 days, pretending I wasn't exhausted down to my bones. Pretending was kind of my superpower. I just didn't know yet how far it would have to go. I noticed him again in the corner booth, the one under the broken light that never stayed fully on. The others barely saw him. He blended into the shadows like they were tailored for him. Dark coat, hands folded, a cup of black coffee that never seemed to get empty even though I almost never saw him drink it. His face looked young, maybe late 20s, but his eyes were the kind you see on people who have buried too many things and survived too many winters. Calm, watchful, a little sad, like he carried a secret so heavy it bent his shoulders even when he sat up straight. He'd been coming in once or twice a week for months, always late, always alone. He never flirted, never complained, always tipped well. I'd filed him in my mind as the quiet guy who looks like he could kill you, but also hands you your dropped napkin. When Mrs. Alvarez forgot her wallet one night, he slipped me a bill at the register and said quietly, "Just tell her someone paid it forward." When I asked his name for the receipt, he just smiled in a way that felt both gentle and dangerous and said, "It wouldn't mean much to you." I told myself that was dramatic and a little creepy, but for some reason, I'd smiled back. That night, though, something about him was different. He sat very still, like a musician listening for a wrong note. His eyes weren't on his coffee or the menu. They were tracking the door, the windows, even the flicker of the fluorescent lights above us. Every time the bell over the door chimed, his hand tensed on the table for half a second before he made it relax, like he was stopping himself from standing up too fast. I could feel his attention like cold air on the back of my neck, and it made me shiver, even though the diner was warm. "Leela, honey, you okay?" Sam, the cook, called over the sizzling of the grill. "You look like you saw a ghost." "Not yet," I joked, forcing a grin. "Just saw table 3 put ketchup on their pancakes again. That's worse." The truckers at the counter laughed, and for a moment everything felt normal. I poured coffee, wiped ketchup rings, slid an extra fry onto the plate of a kid who looked like he couldn't afford to buy more. I moved through the usual tiny kindnesses that made the shift feel a little less heavy, the kind my mom used to say, "No one notices, but they change the world a little." If I'd known who was really sitting in that shadowed booth, and what kind of world he came from, I might have noticed more. Then the door opened, and the night seemed to follow 3 men inside. The bell over the door gave its usual bright jingle, but the sound felt wrong against the sudden hush in my chest. The rain-slicked strangers stood just inside, scanning the room like they were expecting trouble to be waiting with a menu. Long dark coats, boots too clean for real work, eyes that didn't match their easy smiles. There was something in the way they moved that made my brain think of wolves pretending to be house dogs. They took a table by the window, but they didn't really sit like customers. They sat like people setting up a trap. I glanced toward the quiet guy. He wasn't even pretending now. His gaze had locked onto them the second they stepped in, and in that moment his whole presence changed. The sadness in his eyes hardened into something sharper, older, almost royal, like a crown of invisible thorns had settled on his head. The air around him felt heavier, and for one heartbeat, I had the dizzy thought that the shadows weren't just around him, they were listening to him. "Leela, coffee for the new guys," Sam called, sliding 3 chipped mugs onto the counter. "Got it," I said, though my throat was dry. As I filled the cups, I could feel both sets of eyes, the strangers at the window and the not-so-stranger in the corner. One felt like being measured. The other felt like being warned. I carried the tray to the new table, forcing my voice to stay cheerful. "Evening. Rough night out there." One of them smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You could say that. We're looking for someone, actually. Heard this place stays open late." I set the cups down, careful not to spill. "We get all kinds. You'll have to be more specific than someone." His gaze swept over my face like he was memorizing it. "We'll know him when we see him. Thanks, sweetheart." The word sweetheart felt more like a label than a kindness. As I turned away, their quiet laughter followed me. I didn't understand the joke, but my skin prickled like I was the punchline. When I reached the coffee pot again, the quiet guy was suddenly there, standing at the end of the counter. I hadn't heard him move. Up close, he was taller than he looked in the booth, and the air felt cooler around him, though he wasn't wet from the rain. His eyes flicked once toward the 3 men, then back to me, and now there was no softness left in them, only a fierce, focused concern that made my stomach drop. "Leela," he said quietly, and the way he said my name made me wonder how many times he'd practiced it in his head. "Don't look at them again. Not yet. Just breathe and listen." My hand tightened around the coffee pot handle. "Do I know you?" I asked, trying to sound annoyed instead of scared. "Not the way you think," he said. "But I know them. They don't belong in your world, and they're about to drag you into theirs." "Me," I laughed, a little too high. "I'm just the girl who refills their drinks." He glanced back at them once more, then leaned in, close enough that I could see faint silver scars at the edge of his jaw, like old lightning frozen in skin. His voice dropped to a whisper that curled into my ear and refused to leave. "You're in danger," he murmured. "Pretend I'm your dad." Time hiccuped. For a second, all I could hear was the sizzling grill, the clink of forks, the old love song on the jukebox. Dad. My father had walked out when I was 8. The word felt like an empty chair at every table in my life. I stared at the quiet guy, at the stranger with storm-colored eyes, and almost laughed from pure confusion. "What are you talking about?" I whispered back. "Why would I?" "Because they're here for me," he said, and there was no boast in it, only a tired truth. "And they just realized they can get to me through you. You've served me too many nights. They've seen how I watch out for you. They'll use you if I let them. So we change the story, right now. To them, you are not a weak spot. You are my blood, my responsibility, and they know what happens to people who touch what is mine." Something in the way he said mine made goosebumps rise on my arms, not from threat, but from a strange, cold safety, like stepping into shade on a burning day. I didn't know this man. I didn't know why my stupid, small kindnesses had apparently painted a target on my back. I didn't even know why his eyes looked like they'd watched centuries vanish. But I knew one thing with a clarity that scared me more than all of it. He was afraid for me, not of me. I swallowed hard. "You're a regular," I whispered, because my brain couldn't say the other words it wanted to say. Dangerous, not human, something else, something more. "You don't owe me anything." He held my gaze, and in his eyes I saw a flicker of something raw and lonely, like a king standing alone in the ruins of his own castle. "Maybe not," he said, "but I'm very tired of watching good people suffer because of monsters like me. Let me do one thing right just once." The bell over the door chimed again as another gust of wind shoved against the windows, and one of the men at the window table stood up, heading slowly, casually, toward the counter. Toward me. I could feel his stare on the side of my face like a hand sliding closer and closer to my throat. The quiet guy straightened, shoulders squaring, his voice smoothing into something older, bigger, almost royal. "He's coming. In 3 seconds, he will be standing beside you and asking questions he has no right to ask. I need you to look at me like I'm family, like I'm the one person in this room you trust." I could barely breathe, and if I can't fake that. His expression softened, breaking through the steel for a heartbeat. "Then don't fake it," he said. "Just decide right now if you'll let me protect you, even if you don't understand me yet." The footsteps drew closer. I could smell the stranger's cologne and rain-wet coat. My heart pounded so loud I was sure everyone could hear it. I thought about all the nights I'd told myself I didn't need anyone, that I could handle every shift, every bill, every loss alone. I thought about the empty place where Dad was supposed to be in my story. Then I looked up into the eyes of the man in front of me, the man whose coffee never cooled, whose sadness never left, whose voice was suddenly the only steady thing in the room. "Okay," I breathed, the word barely sound at all. He reached out and rested his hand lightly on my shoulder, his touch cold but careful, like I was something fragile he refused to break. When he turned to face the man approaching, his voice rolled out, calm and absolute, every syllable carrying the weight of a throne I couldn't see. "Is there a problem with my daughter?" he asked. And in that moment, with the stranger's eyes darting between us and something ancient waking behind the quiet guy's calm face, I realized this wasn't just a lie to get through a bad night. This was the first move in a game I didn't know the rules to, standing beside a man who might not even be human, and I had already chosen his side. The man from the window stopped beside the counter, close enough that I could see the raindrops still clinging to his lashes. His gaze moved slowly from the quiet guy's hand on my shoulder to my face, like he was matching pieces of a puzzle that didn't quite fit. "I didn't know you had family in town," he said, voice smooth as the coffee I suddenly couldn't feel in my hands. "You've always struck me as alone." The man behind me chuckled softly, but there was no humor in it. "You don't know me as well as you think," he replied. His fingers tightened just the slightest bit on my shoulder, not enough to hurt, just enough to remind me we were in this together. "This is Leela, my daughter." It felt strange, hearing it like that. My daughter. The words dropped into my chest and echoed off all the hollow places where a father should have been. I swallowed hard, forced myself to lean a little into him, like I'd done this 1,000 times, like I believed it. The hunter's eyes slid back to me. "That right?" he asked. "Didn't catch your last name, sweetheart." My brain went completely blank. For a heartbeat, I forgot every last name I'd ever heard, including my own. I felt the man behind me shift, stepping just half a pace closer, and I smelled something quietly cold and clean under the diner smells, like winter air in an old stone church. "Leela," he said, his voice low but steady, "tell the man our name." Our name. I heard it before I understood it. A word brushed the edge of my thoughts, not in my voice, not in his, but like a memory I hadn't lived. Ancient sounding, sharp and soft at the same time. It slid into my mouth before panic could stop it. "Marcellin," I said. "Leela Marcellin." The hunter's eyebrows lifted a fraction. There was a flicker in his eyes, like I'd just said the password to a door he'd been trying to open for years. "Marcellin," he repeated slowly. "Now there's a name I haven't heard in a long time." Behind me, I felt the man, Marcellin, go perfectly still. The entire diner seemed to lean in. The jukebox hummed. Sam flipped a burger. A trucker laughed at something on his phone. But at our little patch of counter, the air was a wire pulled too tight. "You must be mistaken," the man behind me said, but his voice had changed. It was smoother now, darker at the edges, the way velvet feels when you run your hand against the grain. "We're just passing through." The hunter smiled, but it never reached his eyes. "Funny, we've been passing through every town you just passed through for a long time now." He shifted his stance, and his coat moved enough for me to see the glint of something at his belt, metal, shaped like a steak but not quite. You always did like your little stories. I felt my heartbeat kick into a sprint. Dad, I said, and the words scratched my throat on the way out. Can we just go? My shift's almost over and… For a split second, his hand squeezed my shoulder, and something like pride flickered through me. I'd said it. I'd committed to the lie, or maybe to something else I didn't have a name for yet. We're leaving, he agreed. No need to make a scene. The hunter's smile broke just a little. Actually, he said, leaning his elbow on the counter like he was settling in for a friendly chat, I think tonight is exactly the night for a scene, because here's the thing. He turned his head and raised his voice, talking to the whole diner now. The man you know as the quiet late-night regular, he's not what he seems, he's dangerous, and he does not have a daughter. Every head turned. Mrs. Alvarez froze with a fry halfway to her mouth. The truckers went silent. Even the grills seemed to hush. I felt heat rush to my face as everyone's eyes landed on me, then on the hand on my shoulder, then back to my face again. Sir, Sam snapped from behind the grill, wiping his hands on a towel as he moved toward us. You can't just come in here and start. Sit, the man behind me said quietly. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't even look at Sam, but the word rolled out heavy and low, like a bell tolling in slow motion. Sam's knees folded under him, and he dropped into the closest stool with a thud, eyes wide and confused, as if he'd just tripped but couldn't remember over what. The whole diner shivered. The hunter's expression tightened. Still using tricks on humans, I see. I told him to sit so he wouldn't get hurt, the man behind me replied, that strange weight still in his voice. You know I don't like collateral damage. My stomach flipped. I stared at Sam, now blinking in slow astonishment at his own body, then at the quiet guy, at Marcellin, or whatever his real name was, and finally understood. This wasn't a normal late-night drama. Whatever he had just done, it wasn't human. The hunter reached into his coat, and the man behind me shifted, angling his body between us. I heard the faint scrape of wood on leather and instinctively grabbed the back of his jacket. Please, I whispered. Don't do anything, not here, not with everyone watching. For a heartbeat, I didn't know who I was talking to, the hunter or the man I was clinging to. Maybe both. He turned his head just enough that I could see the side of his face, the tension in his jaw. I promised I'd protect you, he said softly. That starts with getting everyone else out of here. He lifted his free hand and snapped his fingers once. The sound was so small I almost missed it, but what followed I couldn't. The lights flickered, then dimmed, casting the diner in a warm, strange half-darkness. The jukebox cut out mid-chorus. For one breathless second, everything stilled. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, voice suddenly carrying to every corner without him raising it at all. There is a gas leak in the kitchen. You need to leave. Now. No one argued. No one asked questions. They just moved. Chairs scraped. Boots thudded. Mrs. Alvarez grabbed her purse, muttering a prayer under her breath. The truckers tossed bills on the counter and headed for the door. Even Sam stood up suddenly, shaking off whatever had held him, and started waving people out. Come on, folks, you heard him. Let's clear out just in case. I watched in stunned silence as the diners obeyed, one by one, not even looking back at the three hunters still seated or standing. It was like a tide pulling back from the shore, leaving only the rocks behind. Within a minute, the Highway Moon diner was nearly empty. Just me, the man at my shoulder, and the three strangers who had brought the storm inside. Rain hammered the windows harder, as if trying to underline the moment. The hunter leaned closer, his voice dropping. Still playing the guardian, he said. Still pretending you can stand between worlds without belonging to either. The man behind me exhaled slowly. Last chance, he replied. Walk away, forget you saw her. She is not part of this. "Oh, but she is now," the hunter said, and the way he looked at me made my skin crawl. "She said your name. Our little waitress just claimed the bloodline of a king." I twisted to look up at the man beside me. "King?" My laugh came out thin and shaky. "What is he talking about?" I demanded. "Who are you?" His eyes met mine, and for the first time since I'd met him, the mask dropped completely. I saw the age in him, the weight, the loneliness. I saw fear, not for himself, but for me. "Later," he said. "Right now we leave." "I don't think you're going anywhere," the hunter replied. He thrust his hand forward, and the thing at his belt flashed in the dim light. It wasn't a stake. It was a slender, gleaming rod etched with symbols I didn't recognize. He touched something on its side, and a sudden, sharp heat ripped through the air, like standing too close to an open oven. The man behind me jerked, a soft hiss escaping between his teeth, and for a split second the hand on my shoulder tightened hard enough to hurt. I saw his jaw clench, the veins in his neck stand out, and his eyes. His eyes flashed, for the first time, with something unmistakably inhuman. Not just dark, but rimmed with a faint, eerie red, like embers trying to escape a dying fire. I gasped. The hunter smiled. "There you are," he said, "Your Majesty." Everything in me wanted to freeze, but his fingers loosened on my shoulder again, gentle, careful, even as whatever that rod was did its burning work. "Leela," he said, voice rougher now, "go to the back door. Do not run until I tell you." "I'm not leaving you," I shot back, surprising myself with how true that suddenly felt. His gaze softened for half a breath. "You are braver than you should have to be," he murmured. "But listen to me. I can take pain. I can't take it if they touch you." The words punched straight through my fear. I backed away slowly, heart pounding, moving toward the swinging door that led to the kitchen, never taking my eyes off him. The hunter stepped forward again. "You can't keep playing both sides forever," he said. "You can't be a monster and a savior. Tonight you choose." The man, my fake father, my mysterious regular, whatever he was, straightened to his full height, that quiet, terrifying dignity settling over him like a cloak. His voice, when he answered, filled the room. "I made my choice a long time ago," he said. "I chose them." His gaze slid to me, just for a heartbeat, and something warm and sharp moved in my chest. "Now," he said. I ran. I pushed through the kitchen door, past the clatter of pans and the smell of onions and oil, and shoved the back exit open. Night air slammed into me, cold and wet. As I stumbled into the alley, I heard a sound behind me, metal hitting tile, a grunt, a low growl that did not sound human at all. I turned just in time to see him appear in the doorway in a blur of motion, faster than any person should be able to move. His eyes were still rimmed with that eerie glow, his chest heaving, his hand wrapped around the hunter's metal rod, now bent in half like a toy. Rain slid down his pale face but never seemed to soak his dark coat. In the dim alley light, something about him looked wrong in a way I couldn't name. Too still, too sharp, too beautiful and terrible at once. "Leela," he said, voice carrying over the storm. "You asked who I am." Lightning flickered in the sky, washing his features in white for a single, shocking heartbeat. His eyes caught the light and reflected it back like an animal's in the dark. "I'm not your dad," he said quietly. "I'm not even human." The word I'd been dancing around all night finally stepped out of the shadows between us, and I heard it before he said it. "I'm a vampire." He held my gaze like he was daring me to run, and not just any vampire. Behind him, the hunter shouted something I couldn't hear. Inside the diner, something crashed to the floor. "Leela," he said, the rain roaring between us, "I am their king." And for the first time in my life, I realized that the scariest part of the monsters in my story might not be what they were, but what choosing to trust one of them would turn me into. The word hung between us, like thunder that hadn't decided where to land. Vampire. If someone had said it an hour earlier, I would have laughed it off. But standing there in the rain, watching it bead on skin that didn't flush or tremble, seeing eyes that caught light like glass, feeling the cold patience rolling off him in waves, it didn't feel like a story anymore. It felt like a truth my bones had been trying not to see. "You're joking," I managed, my voice barely louder than the rain. "Tell me you're joking." Inside the diner, a shout cut short. A chair crashed over. Somewhere, glass shattered. His head snapped toward the sound, then back to me. There was no time left for gentle explanations. "I wish I were," he said. "But right now, I need you to move. They won't stay distracted for long." He stepped into the alley, and I, like an idiot, stepped back, just one small, instinctive pace. His face flickered, a flash of hurt buried under all that ancient control. "I'm not going to feed on you, Leela," he said quietly. "That's not who I am." It was such a bizarre sentence that a half-hysterical laugh escaped me. "Sorry," I sputtered. "It's just, this is a lot. Table 12 needs more napkins to my regular is a vampire king in under 10 minutes. You can't expect me to just." A body flew through the kitchen doorway behind him and slammed into the far wall of the alley, sliding down in a heap. One of the hunters. He groaned, already pushing himself up, eyes burning with something that had nothing to do with kindness. The man in front of me moved so fast I almost didn't see it, just a blur of dark coat and pale hands. In an instant, he was between me and the hunter, one hand held out, fingers splayed. "Stay down," he ordered. The hunter froze, one knee still on the wet pavement, his entire body fighting some invisible pressure. His teeth bared, not in a smile this time. "You're weak," the hunter spat. "You could end this in a second and you won't." "I'm not weak," the vampire king said, and in that moment, his voice was the sound of stone doors closing. "I'm tired of killing being the only answer." He turned to me again, urgency blazing through the calm. "We need to go, now, before they call more, before someone innocent sees too much." "I've already seen too much," I said, but my feet were moving anyway, my survival instinct dragging the rest of me along. We bolted down the alley together, water splashing under our shoes. He ran like the rain couldn't touch him, like the world was moving slower for him than it was for me. Within a few steps, he had matched my pace, not out of need, but out of choice, holding himself back so I wouldn't be alone. At the mouth of the alley, he stopped short and grabbed my hand. His palm was cold, but steady, like marble carved into the shape of a promise. "This way," he said. "Your car's the other direction," I pointed out, breathless. "Too obvious," he replied. "They'll expect that." "Of course they will," I muttered, because apparently this was my life now, arguing about escape routes with a vampire king in the middle of a storm. He pulled me toward the side of the building, toward a patch of darkness where the streetlight had died years ago. The shadows there seemed thicker, like oil instead of air. I dug my heels in. "Nope," I said. "Absolutely not. I've seen enough horror movies to know you do not follow a vampire into extra dark darkness." His mouth twitched just a little. "I don't sparkle," he said dryly, "if that helps." "Not really." He sobered. "Leela, do you trust me?" The honest answer was no. I didn't. Not completely. I barely knew him. He wasn't what he seemed. He had just bent a weapon with his bare hands and frozen a grown man with a word. But I had watched him slip money to old ladies and call fake gas leaks to clear out diners before things got ugly. I had just watched him put himself between me and a hunter twice his size without hesitation. And when he could have snapped that hunter's neck, he hadn't. What scared me more than what he was that I wanted to trust him. "I don't know yet," I said, because lying felt impossible with his eyes on mine. But I trust you more than I trust the guys who walked into my job and turned it into a war zone. He nodded once, like that was enough, like that answer had been given to him before in other centuries, in other alleys. Good, he said. Then step with me, stay close, don't let go. Before I could change my mind, he pulled me into the shadow. For a heartbeat, it was just normal darkness and cold brick. Then the world tilted. The sound of the rain stretched, like someone was dragging a needle across a record. The light from the street behind us smeared and bent, and the wall in front of us wasn't a wall anymore, but something softer, deeper, like the inside of a tunnel dug out of night itself. I stumbled, grabbing his arm with both hands. "What is this?" I gasped. "Shortcut," he said through clenched teeth. "I don't use it often. It takes something out of me. But we don't have time for the long way." The darkness pressed in around us, cool and velvety, not suffocating but heavy. My own breath sounded too loud in my ears. There was no smell here, no wet asphalt or grease or coffee, just the faintest hint of old stone and something like pine smoke. In the distance, or maybe close by, it was impossible to tell, I heard something howl. It didn't sound like any animal I knew. It sounded lonely. "How far does this go?" I whispered. "As far as shadows do," he said. "We're almost there." "Almost where?" He didn't answer right away, and that scared me more than any word could have. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer, like he was ashamed of the answer. "Home," he said. The tunnel began to lighten, gray seeping into black, then brown, then the flicker of actual warm light. We stepped out of the shadow and into a wide, dusty room that smelled like old books and colder nights. We were in what looked like the lobby of a once-grand building. High ceilings, cracked marble floor, a chandelier dripping cobwebs instead of crystal. Heavy curtains covered tall windows. A fire crackled weakly in a stone fireplace, like it had been left burning just in case someone came back. I spun in a slow circle. "Where are we?" I asked. He let go of my hand, flexing his fingers like they ached. "Edge of town," he said. "You'd know it as the Graybridge Hotel. It closed down before you were born." "I walk past this place on my way to the bus stop," I said, stunned. "I always thought it looked haunted." His lips quirked. "It is," he said, "by me." For a second, that landed as a joke. Then I saw the line of cots neatly folded against the wall, the stack of worn books beside the fireplace, the mug on the low table half full of something dark and thick that definitely wasn't coffee. A life pieced together in the quiet. "How long have you been here?" I asked. He looked toward one of the covered windows, like he could see through it to a much older view. "On and off," he said. "A few decades. Long enough to know which bus drivers let kids ride free when they're short on change. Long enough to watch you grow up." My head snapped toward him. "What?" His eyes widened slightly, like he'd said too much. "I don't mean that the way it sounds," he said quickly. "I don't lurk outside your window, I'm not that, but I've seen you. At the bus stop, at the grocery store, at the library sleeping on the table after a double shift. You're hard to miss, Leela." Heat rushed to my face. "Why?" I demanded. "Because I spill things a lot." "Because you keep choosing kindness," he said simply. "Even when no one's looking, you remind me of someone I failed a long time ago." The fire popped. Shadows jumped across his face, carving hollows under his eyes. "The hunters," I said slowly. "They called you Your Majesty. They said I claimed the bloodline of a king. What does that even mean?" He walked to the fireplace and rested a hand on the mantel. For the first time since we'd left the diner, he looked uncertain, almost shy. "My name is Lucian Marcellin," he said at last. "I was crowned king of the Nocturnese court in the year 1723 when I was 27 years old. That was the last time I aged." I sank onto the nearest dusty armchair before my knees cut out. "You're 300 years old." 305, he corrected like that mattered. Give or take. And you're just living above an abandoned hotel, I said. Drinking whatever that is. I pointed at the dark mug. He followed my gaze and shrugged. Synthetic, he said. Chemically close enough to blood to keep our kind alive, far enough that it doesn't cost anyone their life. Not as satisfying, according to some. I think not murdering people makes it taste better. I stared at him. You're a vampire king who lives on fake blood and hangs out at diners making sure old ladies can pay their bills. Everyone needs a hobby, he said dryly. This isn't funny, I snapped, the last shaky thread of control in me finally fraying. Those men at the diner, they weren't just after you. They said I was part of this now. They said I claimed your bloodline. What does that mean, Lucian? My voice broke a little on his name. He heard it. He closed his eyes for a second like he was bracing for a blow. It means, he said slowly, that by calling yourself a Marcellin, you gave them a story they can use. And in our world, stories are as binding as laws. I just said what you put in my head, I shot back. You did something, some mind trick. I nudged you, he admitted. I gave you the name so you wouldn't stammer and give us away. I didn't expect you to take it like that. Completely. You spoke it as if it were yours. He pushed off the mantle and turned to face me fully. In the firelight, he looked less like a monster and more like a man carrying too many ghosts. The hunters serve a council, he said. A group that believes my existence is a threat to the balance between our world and yours. They've been trying to kill me for centuries. Now, thanks to my own stupidity, they think you're connected to me, that you might be some kind of weakness, or worse, some kind of key. Key to what? I whispered. He held my gaze, and for a moment I saw real fear there. To proving I can care about a human without destroying them, he said. If they can break you, they'll prove I'm as much of a monster as they say. Silence settled heavy in the dusty room. Okay, I said finally, my voice much calmer than I felt. So they're going to keep coming. They'll hurt people around me to get to you. They'll hurt you to get to me. And you think the best way to fix that is, what? Hide me here forever. His jaw tightened. The best way to fix it is to make sure they never remember meeting you at all. A chill ran through me that had nothing to do with his cold presence. What are you saying? I'm saying I can erase myself from your memories, he said softly. You'll remember the diner, your life, everything, just not me, not tonight, not the danger. If they come for you again, you won't know why. They'll have no hold on you. You'll be safe. My hand curled into the worn arm of the chair. You can do that. He nodded once. Yes. And you've done it before, I realized. His eyes dropped to the cracked floor. Yes. Anger and grief twisted together in my chest. To who? I demanded. To how many? Too many, he whispered. Every human I ever cared about became a target, so I did the only kind thing I knew how to do. He looked up again, and there was raw pain in his gaze now, nothing royal about it. But when you walked up to my booth with that tired smile and spilled coffee on my menu and asked if I was having the usual, sir, I realized I was so tired of being a ghost in my own life. I told myself I'd just watch, just tip well, just make sure you got home safe when your shift ran late. No stories, no names, no one would notice. He spread his hands helplessly, and now here we are. I stood up slowly, every inch of me trembling. So your grand plan, I said, my voice shaking, is to make me forget the only person who has ever cleared out a room to keep me safe, to rip yourself out of my memories because it's easier than fighting for me. His face crumpled, just for a heartbeat. It's the only way I know to keep you alive. And what if I don't want that? I shot back. What if I'm sick of being the girl nobody chooses to fight for? My dad walked away. My ex left when my mom got sick. You really think I'm going to let you walk into my head and walk out again because you're scared? He stared at me like I was something brand new in a world that had stopped surprising him a long time ago. "You don't understand what standing next to me costs," he said hoarsely. "Then explain it," I said. "Teach me, don't erase me." For a long moment, the only sound was the fire and the distant mutter of thunder. Finally, very slowly, he shook his head. "You are brave," he murmured. "Braver than most kings I've known, but bravery and survival are not the same thing." He took a step closer, and I felt a strange pressure at the edge of my thoughts, like a door being tested for weakness. "Lucian," I whispered, backing away, tears burning my eyes. "Don't, please don't." His own eyes shone wetly, though I never saw a tear fall. "I'm sorry," he said. "You won't remember this apology, but you deserve to hear it." The pressure in my mind deepened, like a tide rising around my ankles, my knees, my chest. My vision blurred at the edges. He reached out, fingertips inches from my temple. And then, somewhere outside, something howled again, closer this time, sharper, followed by the distinct crack of a door slamming open downstairs. Lucian's head snapped toward the sound. The pressure in my thoughts vanished so fast I swayed. "They found us," he whispered. A cold wind knifed through the room, carrying the smell of wet earth and metal. "Stay behind me," he said, his voice suddenly all king again. "Whatever happens next, do not run. If you run, they will chase you." "Who?" I asked, though in my gut I already knew. He turned toward the staircase leading down to the lobby, shoulders squaring, shadows gathering around his feet like loyal dogs answering a call. "The hunters," he said, and this time they didn't come alone. Footsteps thundered up the staircase, heavy and sure. Lucian stepped forward, putting himself between me and the door, his posture suddenly regal in a way I had no words for. The tired diner regular was gone. In his place stood something older than the wallpaper and twice as unyielding. 3 figures burst into the room. The hunters from the diner, coats dripping, eyes hard. Behind them, filling the doorway like a storm cloud given human shape, was someone new. He was taller than Lucian, with dark hair streaked silver at the temples and eyes the color of old coins. Unlike the hunters, he wore no coat, just a simple black shirt and an expression that said he was used to having doors open for him without knocking. He took in the scene in a glance, Lucian, the fire, me, and smiled, slow and cold. "Your Majesty," he said. Where the hunters had spat the title like an insult, this man made it sound like both mockery and acknowledgement. "You've redecorated. I like what you've done with the place. Very exile chic." Lucian's hands curled at his sides. "Cashin," he said. "I should have known they'd drag you into this." "Oh, they didn't drag me," Cashin replied mildly. "They asked nicely and they promised something interesting. They were right." His eyes settled on me, and I felt stripped bare, like he could see every fear I'd ever tried to hide. "And this must be the girl," he mused. "The waitress who called herself a Marcellin. Do you know what you've done, little human?" I swallowed. "I made the mistake of coming into work," I said, because my mouth defaulted to sarcasm when my brain was on fire. One corner of his mouth twitched. "She has spirit," he observed. "I see the appeal." "Leave her out of this," Lucian said, voice low and dangerous. The shadows at his feet darkened, rippling like something alive. "Impossible," Cashin replied pleasantly. "You broke your own exile for her. You used the shadow paths. You claimed her as blood in front of witnesses. There's no leaving her out of anything now." One of the hunters shifted uneasily. "We didn't agree to bring more monsters into this city," he muttered. Cashin didn't look at him. "You brought me because your methods weren't working," he said. "Now let me do what you couldn't." Lucian took a step forward. "You're not touching her." The air in the room changed. It thickened, humming, like the moment before lightning hits. The hunter's eyes darted between the 2 men. Every instinct I had screamed at me to duck, to hide, to disappear. Instead, I moved closer to Lucian's back. Cashin saw it and raised an eyebrow. "You see," he said lightly, "she already thinks you can protect her. You never learn." "What do you want?" Lucian asked, every syllable a stone. Cashin spread his hands. "What I've always wanted. Balance. You refuse to rule, you refuse to die, you refuse to let go of this mercy obsession of yours. Meanwhile, our people are leaderless, the council panics, the hunters get bolder, and the line between worlds grows thin. This girl," he nodded at me, "she's proof that you still care more about humans than your own kind. That makes her a liability, or a weapon, depending who gets to her first." I hated that his words landed with a kind of logic. I hated that he sounded almost reasonable. "So what?" I demanded, stepping around Lucian despite his quick, soft, "Leela, no. You kill me to make a point. You chain me up until Lucian behaves. You use me to prove he's a monster. How does any of that fix your balance problem?" Cashin studied me, head tilted. "Interesting," he murmured. "You speak like someone who believes her life belongs to her." "It does," I shot back. "Last I checked, I'm not a crown or a prophecy. I'm just a person who is trying to pay rent." He laughed, a sharp, genuine sound. "You chose well," he said to Lucian. "Or perhaps she chose you." Lucian bristled. "She did not choose this." "Neither did we," Cashin replied, and for a second bitterness slipped through his calm. "We didn't choose to have a king who abdicated without dying. That's not how our stories go, Lucian. You broke the rules. The world is cracking around that choice. Choices have consequences." "Then let them fall on me," Lucian said. "Not on her, not on anyone else." Cashin's gaze softened in a way that scared me more than his amusement. "They already have," he said.